Hey everyone, it's Ryan with The Smart House, and on today's video we're going to take a look at a request that I've got from a lot of people on how I do my car data dashboard in Home Assistant. So on today's video I figured I'd do an introduction on how I pull data from my 2012 Volvo S60 and upload it into Home Assistant. Now I'm sure there's many ways of doing this, so this method should work with most vehicles built after 1997 that are equipped with what's called an ODB2 port. Now this is a small port that's typically found under the driver's side dashboard. It's typically used to pull diagnostic data from a car. It can also be used to pull data like fuel consumption, RPMs, and speed on most modern vehicles. Now, unfortunately, this video is only applicable for those of you who have Android phones. I haven't found an iOS application that lets you take ODB2 data from a reader and parse it into a file that's readable by another application. If you happen to know one, please leave it in the comments below. I'd love to make a video for all my friends that use iOS. So hopefully this is a video that you're interested in. I know it's gonna be a bit of a longer video because I have a lot to cover, there's a lot of components, but hopefully I make it easy and simple for you to understand. If you decide to tackle this project, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you did on this project and how your dashboard turned out. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing you're gonna need is one of these ODB2 Bluetooth or Wi-Fi adapters. Now you can get one of these on Amazon for about $15 to $20. The quality is all about the same, so there's really nothing special. Now these will connect to the car's ODB2 port, which I referred to earlier, typically under the dashboard of the vehicle, and will be sourced off of the 12 volts that your car already uses to power all the other onboard electronics. One thing to note is these typically run off of a constant 12 volt power instead of a switch 12 volt power, so you might want to make sure that you don't run the car's battery down if it's not ran very often. So the next few requirements are actually software that you need to run on your phone. So the first application that we're going to talk about is an application called Torque. I've had it probably 7-something years, and it's what is used to communicate between the car's ODB2 port and your mobile phone. There are two versions of this application, the Lite and the Pro version. The Lite is free and the Pro version is about $5 US. I would tell you to go ahead and download the Lite version to make sure it's going to work for what you need. The Pro version adds a few more functions that you can read from the car's ODB2 port, plus some additional features. We're only using Torque to extract the data from the ODB2 port and put it in a parsable format that can be read off your phone. Our second paid application is called Task. Now this is an application that I've been using for near on a decade. It's ancient by App Store standard, but it's being constantly updated by the author Zhao. He does a great job of keeping this up to date for newer versions of Android. Now, this is a fantastic app if you're wanting to automate your phone. It costs about $3.50 US, and it's worth every penny. I use it multiple times a day. I plan on doing more Tasker videos here in the near future to show you the power of this application. We're going to be using Tasker to take the exported data from the CSV file and parse it and then place it in your Home Assistant instance. The final application you're going to need is a plugin for Tasker, aptly named the Home Assistant Tasker plugin. This will let us communicate with the Home Assistant API without having to do a lot of fiddling. This one is free and also available in the Play Store. Now finally, you're going to have the Home Assistant API set up and functional. This means port forwarding if you're going to be doing this from outside your house, which you typically will. I won't go into the details on how to do that in this video, but if you can already access your Home Assistant instance from the outside world, you're good to go. I could do this via Nabokasa, but I'd have to explain that in a different method in a different video. All right, now that we have all of our requirements, let's hop back in the car and get the applications configured. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and get Torque configured with our ODB2 connected. So the first thing you want to take on your phone is go ahead and open up your Bluetooth settings. So you want to go ahead and make sure your ODB2 reader is connected and your phone is searching for new devices. It should find it, and typically they're called ODB2 or sometimes just called BD2. Check the manual of your reader to make sure you have the right settings. If it doesn't find it the first time, go ahead and disconnect power and reconnect it. So here's mine at the bottom, it's called BD2. I'll click on it. And typically with these serial devices, the password's 1234, or it could also be 000. And once it's connected, it'll go ahead and move up to the top half where the rest of your devices live. If it fails, you may have to reset it and try again. You may also need to restart the Bluetooth on your phone if you cannot connect to the serial device. So once it shows up on your paired devices list, let's go ahead and open up Torque. Now, when you first open up Torque, for the first time, you'll be asked to set up a vehicle profile. This is important. This is how Torque pulls information like the weight of your vehicle and the size of your fuel tank, so that way it can accurately tell you your fuel levels. So once you have that set up, go ahead and go into the settings and then go to ODB2 adapter settings. Make sure connection type is set to Bluetooth. Choose your device. So this will pull up all of your paired devices on your phone, and then make sure you have it selected. So mine's already selected for BD2. And then if you go back to the beginning, it should show at the top next to the vehicle, there should be an ODB2 plug icon indicating that you have a solid connection. Now, if you see on the right-hand side of the screen down here, I've got a rev counter, and that matches the rev counter of the vehicle. Since the car is running right now, if I press the gas pedal, you'll see the rev counter will go up. Here's where you can customize all the data you want to pull from Torque. So if we click that settings wheel again, go to settings, And then we want to go to data logging and upload. So here at the top is where we can select what items we want to log. Now, by default, it will log a lot of information automatically, like latitude, longitude, speed, X, Y, and Z acceleration coming from your phone, and a few other bits of data. That is automatically included in the CSV file, but in addition, you can add any of the compatible PIDs from your car into this application. So to do that, you need to press the three dots in the top right-hand corner and say select what to log. Now what this is going to do is give you this big long list of all of the things that Torque can see from your vehicle. So anything in green, you'll see actually live data being fed from the car's ODB2 port into your phone. So you can select any number of these items and have them added into that CSV file that we're going to store on board our phone. So if you look right now, I have the fuel cost per trip, and this resets every time the ODB2 adapter is removed. The fuel level pulled right from the engine ECU, fuel remaining. This takes the percentage from the vehicle's ODB2 port and then multiplies it by the amount of fuel that your car can carry in its profile. The miles per gallon, which this is a long-term average, so this averages over time every time I use the vehicle. Trip average miles per gallon, again, reset every time I reset the car. And then trip distance. So let's back out. We want to delay synchronous logging because we don't really care if one of the PIDs isn't present. File logging interval, this is how often you want to take a reading from those onboard measurements. You can set this anywhere you want. There's no real reason to have it set anything faster than 1 second because we're only going to upload every couple of minutes. Then we want to make sure we have log when Torque is started selected. We also want to turn on only when ODB is connected. This will prevent the log file from being generated for just information like latitude and longitude. Automatically log GPS, again, this will take the latitude and longitude of the vehicle, so that way you can parse that data into, say, a parking map if you want to. I turn off G sensors because I really don't care, and we want to have it select to only do 2 decimal places for the log values. We don't really need that big of a unit of measure, so we don't want to have it go to like 6 or 7 points of precision. Now, I've never been able to get the web server to function, so we'll ignore all that section. Then at the bottom here, we want to select automatic trip recording, update the trip distance only when connected, discard trips for less than 1/4 of a mile, ignore short gaps between trips, log trips, fuel consumed, and also log selected sensors. One thing to note is make sure you have rotate log files turned off. This is important, that way it generates the same log file at the same location every single time, so we don't have to fiddle around trying to find a CSV file buried in the date folder. All right, so after that's all done, we've got everything set up. So now the next thing to do is go ahead and have Torque active and drive your vehicle around. That way you'll get some data that we can parse in the next section. This next piece is much easier to do on a computer because we're going to be reading out a giant CSV file, which is near impossible on a mobile phone. So let's go ahead and drive around for a little bit, gather some data, and then we'll head back to the office to parse that, and I'll show you the next steps. All right, so now we're back in the office. So to make things easier, I've gone ahead and taken the CSV file that is output by Torque and placed it on my computer, so that way I can open it up and count which number of columns refers to what the data I want. We need to do this because tasks are going to go down to the last line in the file, take that last line, and it's going to split it based on the comma, since it's a CSV file, and then it's going to load those into an array, and then we need to count which number of the array that we want to pull the data from. So it's important that we figure out which column refers to which piece of data. If you're looking for the CSV file, it's typically going to be stored on the root of your phone, under Documents, and then Torque Logs. You can verify that by going into the software or searching for tracklog.csv. So here's the track log file I pulled off my phone. I'm going to open it in Excel, but you can of course open this in Google Sheets or Excel Online if you don't have a license of Excel. So you'll notice that there's a heading at the top of each of these columns that correlate to what data it's pulling out of Torque. Now the data we are concerned about mostly are things like latitude and longitude, the GPS speed. You could pull altitude if you wanted to, but that's not really necessary. Fuel level, which of course you'll notice bounces up and down because as you're driving, the fuel gauge goes up and down. The miles per gallon, long-term average, trip average MPG, and total distance of the trip. You'll notice that continuously increases throughout the size of the file. So again, it's going to grab out of the last line of the file and use that every single time. So as we're logging data, it will be continuously adding the latest data to the bottom of the file. So that's super handy because all we have to do is grab that last line to get the latest data, process it, and then upload that to Home Assistant. So real quick, while we're in here, let's go ahead and get the column numbers that we're curious about. So we know that the set longitude is in column 3, so 1, 2, 3. Latitude is in column 4, speed's in column 5. Fuel levels in column 10. Miles per gallon is in 12. Miles per gallon average is in 13, and the trip distance is in 14. Now these are going to be important, so make sure you write those numbers down, which ones correlate to which ones. We're going to need those here in a minute when we set up Tasker. So now we're done with that file, we can go ahead and close out of Excel. So let's jump into Tasker. Now to make things easier, I went ahead and loaded everything up into BlueStacks. So I had a fresh start, because again, I've been using Tasker for a decade now. So I wanted to make sure I started everything from scratch. So I loaded it all into BlueStacks. So that's why I'm showing you here. It's bigger, looks better on screen. We'll go ahead and load that up and head back to the home screen and open up Tasker. So we're gonna go ahead and click the full experience because we don't want any of the help right now. Accept terms of service. We don't care about any of that stuff. And this is a virtual machine, so it doesn't really matter. So now that we've got Tasker open and ready to go, let's go ahead and go to this URL here below. That'll take you to the blog post for today's video. That contains the 2 profiles that you need to download for Tasker and import. I'm gonna go through these line by line, but I figured it'd be easier for you to follow along than have to try to copy down everything I'm doing, especially if you're not familiar with Tasker. So there's 2 files here, one called parsefileclean.tsk and one called car2ha.tsk. So the first one we wanna grab is the parse file, and make sure you're doing this on your device, not on your computer, or if you wanna do it on your computer and then transfer it, that's fine, but these XML files need to land on your device. Long click on both of these and select download link. And then let's hop back over into Tasker. All right, now that we're in Tasker, long press on tasks and select import task. Of course, you have to allow it to see your device. You want to go up to the root of the phone, downloads, and there's our 2 files here. So we're gonna start with one called parse file clean, hit okay. And since we're doing this, let's go ahead and get the other one, import task, and grab the car2ha. So the parse file task is going to take that CSV file that's on your device, load it into Tasker, split it apart, and then store the relevant ones in named variables in Tasker. Then it's going to invoke the car2ha task to go ahead and upload each of those variables to your MQTT server via Home Assistant's API. Now we did this so we don't have to open up any special ports for MQTT. You could do direct MQTT and there are plugins for Tasker, but I figured this would be easier because you're just going to go ahead and use the Home Assistant API to make that call on the back end. And then when we're done, I'll show you how to set up the sensors that are required to pull that data into Home Assistant. All right, so let's open up the parse file clean. And we notice that first line is the link to the CSV file, which is stored in documents, torque logs, tasklog.csv. That's going to load that into a variable, a temporary variable, since this first letter is lowercase. It's a temporary variable called full file. That full file is going to be split. So that full file is every bit of text from this file loaded into a variable. It's going to split it, and if you notice here, there's a carriage return right here. What that carriage return is going to do is split it at the end of every new line. So now we have an array filled with every single line, each line individually stored as an individual element in the array. So then we're going to set the variable torque count, again temporary, to full file parentheses, # parentheses. What this does is this sets this variable to the number of elements in the array. So whenever you see a variable in Tasker with the parentheses, that indicates it's an array. If it's an array with the # in here, this is going to return the number of elements in that array. So in theory, what this is going to do is give us the last line of the text file, because it'll be the, say, 250th line or the 1000th line or whatever it happens. Then we want to set this new variable, again, temporary variable called torque, to the original entire parsed file, which will have every individual line in the array, to the last line in the array. So it's going to set value torque to the last line taken from the CSV file. Then we're going to split that torque variable with a comma. Since it's a comma separated value, that will give us another array that will just contain the elements from that line in the order of the columns that we want. So remember, we said before the longitude is number 3, column 3, latitude's column 4. So again, we're going to set the global variable, so the permanent variable, because it's got a capital letter, car_lon, to the third element of this torque array, which will be the third column. Same thing with the latitude, the fourth element of that array. Then we're going to set trip distance to the 14th column in that array, but we're going to round it down. So we don't really care if it's going to be a mile or a mile and a half. We just want to round that variable. Then we will do the same thing for miles per gallon, which is the 12th element. We're going to round it down. And then the fuel level, we want to pull that from line 10. So again, we want to round that down to just the percentage for the fuel level. And then for the trip cost, we're just going to simply set it to the 9th variable. So you'll see here, there are checks in each of these because these will occasionally come back with a minus sign, and that will cause this whole thing to fail. So it will only run that particular element if it doesn't equal a negative sign. All right, so that is the end of the parsing portion of it. Then it invokes our car2HA for each item. And what it's going to do is it's going to grab 2 parameters when it runs it. The first parameter being the variable that we want to store in MQTT. The second will be the value pulled directly out of those global variables that we stored to up here. So it's going to invoke that for each of the parameters. Obviously, there's more efficient ways of doing this, but this was a quick and easy way of doing that. So now that we know that that's the end of that file. So it's going to run that for each of those variables, and that's going to be the end of it. So let's hop over into the car2HA and see how that works. That is simply a single call service for MQTT publish. We need to do one quick thing, and that's configure this plugin. Now this plugin has to be set up to point to your Home Assistant instance, and you need to get a long-lived access token and place that inside of there so that way you have authorization to make API calls. So to do that, we simply click on the edit button here. So this is what it's going to do. It's going to perform an MQTT publish, but first let's go up here to the top and notice there are no servers up here. So we need to hit the plus button. So for the server name, I'm gonna put in my test, the base URL. So this will be your base URL. So it may be https something.duckdns.org. You're gonna need to hit your external name. You can't do this obviously you won't be on Wi-Fi because you're in a car driving around. So make sure you set your external DuckDNS name. That'll be what you're gonna use for the rest of this process. So we want to put that in here. And then this access token, this is going to be that token that we pull from Home Assistant. So if you don't remember how to do that, you simply go down here to your profile, which is the bottom left picture down there, scroll to the bottom, and you're going to create a new long-lived access token. So we click create token, give it a name, click OK, and we'll go ahead and grab this code, which is blurred obviously on the screen. See, this access token is much bigger. So make sure you scroll all the way to the right and highlight it. Don't just rely on Control A because it will sometimes miss pieces and parts of this code. Okay, much better. Hit test server and it'll say connection successful if your information is correct. Click back and now you'll see your server name selected here at the top. So again, we're going to do an MQTT publish. So this relates directly to the service in Home Assistant. So we're going to invoke the service MQTT.publish. This is the payload we're going to send it. Now you will notice anywhere you see one of these percent signs, that's being replaced with a variable. So it's going to call that variable out of Tasker and it's going to replace it in this string. Now this is why it's super flexible. You won't need to write at one of these for each individual one because it's going to reach out and grab that data from your variable, place it into the string, and then push that out to Home Assistant. The topic is going to be torque/car. So you want to create a new variable called car in Tasker because I have multiple cars. I have one for my Volvo, one for my Pacifica. So you could obviously just skip this part, delete that entirely if you wanted to, or you could put a car variable in there. And then it's going to use that first parameter, so lat or lon, and then it's going to put the payload in there from before. So this is all done. We have the retain turned on. So we'll hit back here. And before we forget, let's hop over here to variables. And you'll see all those variables that we've created. Create a new one called car. And then we'll double click on it. And we're going to populate, we're going to call it Volvo. All right, so let's head back to tasks. Now everything is set up, ready to go. So let's do our first test. So we're going to open up the parse file clean and then go down here to the bottom and click the play button. That's going to read through the entire folder and do all those commands we talked about. Now to check this in Tasker, we can pop over to variables and we'll see, look, we've got latitude, we've got longitude, fuel level, trip cost, trip distance, and trip miles per gallon, all in Tasker. We know that Tasker is doing its job. It's parsing the data out of that sheet and it's putting it into variables. So now we need to hop over to MQTT Explorer to make sure this data actually made it all the way up to Home Assistant. Here we are in MQTT Explorer. Let's open up Torque. So we have a Volvo key. Let's make sure these align. And if you look here, the upload date was May 2nd, 22 at 7:51 p.m., which correlates to the time on the clock here. So we know this data got uploaded automatically. and is currently populating the correct data in Home Assistant. So we know everything seems to be working just fine. We can test that again by popping into our tasker, going to tasks, and running the profile again, just to make sure we get a new time stamp. MQTT Explorer updated. Now it's 7:52. It's 16 seconds. So it's uploading. The data is getting into Home Assistant, and now all is good. So there we go. Now we have all of the information we need from our phone. We get the data out of Torque, place it in a CSV file. That CSV file is parsed by tasker, and those parsed elements are then uploaded to Home Assistant. So real quick, let's jump into Home Assistant. I'll show you very quickly how to set up MQTT sensors to pull that data down. So now I'm back in my Home Assistant instance, and we will see that all the elements that we had before are now in here. So this is my live dashboard. This is how I set these up. So I've got a variable for longitude, latitude, fuel level, MPG, distance, and cost. Now, again, these are all MQTT sensors. So we'll hop into the code. I'll show you how to do those. But you'll see I've just got a simple little fuel gauge here and all these elements. Obviously, if I wanted to, I could set up a device tracker, parse that GPS information into there to make my car show up on the map. So that way I can use it sort of as a parking guide. If you wanted to do that, there's a function in Home Assistant under the services. If we go to Developer Tools, Services, and if we go to Device Tracker, you'll see this Device Tracker C. Now this can be used to create a new virtual device tracker that you want to create for that. Is give it a device ID and the GPS coordinates, parse those in the correct format, and then you would have a new device tracker named whatever you want that would show up on your map. If you want to see more details on this, let me know in the comments. I will put a blog post together about it. And it sounds like a storm just rolled in, so that's where you're hearing all the rain in the background. To create these sensors, let's pop into our Visual Studio Code. And of course, these sensor examples are on the blog post at the bottom, or you can just copy and paste them if you want to. Again, link at the bottom. Let's go to sensors.yaml and we'll search for Volvo. So then down here at the bottom, we have all of the car sensors called Torque. It's platform MQTT. State topic is that Torque, Volvo, lawn. So in your case, if you have a different car name, you'd want to change Volvo to whatever it happens to be. Or if you remove that entirely, delete that out of each of these elements. We gave it a name called Volvo longitude, simple as that, and repeated that for each of the variables: longitude, latitude, fuel level, MPG, trip distance, and trip cost. Now you will notice under the unit of measurement, I've added in percentages, MPGs, miles, and dollars to make it show up better on the dashboard. Simple as that. And once you save this, restart Home Assistant, and then those elements should show up in your developer tools. You can add them to whatever dashboard you want. There you go. Now you have live data streaming from your Torque. Now we'll do one last quick element, and that's set this up to repeat continuously while you're in the car. So to do that, let's hop back to our Android device. Go back out. Now we're going to create a profile. A profile is something that's checked constantly. It's a series of requirements that when they're met, it will execute a task. So we're going to go ahead and hit the plus button here. We're going to create a new one, and we're going to base this on an application. Now, I've already installed Torque on this virtual device to show you. So all you have to do is click Torque. So what this is going to do is anytime Torque turns on, it's going to start this task. So we're going to select Torque and hit back, and then hit OK. That's fine. Enabled, yeah, because it's got to have the capability to see usage access to see what is being used, and then we'll hit back. Right, so we've selected Torque. If you wanted it to add another element like a time of day, or if connecting to your car's Bluetooth, you can do that. Once we're finished adding the task here, all you need to do is just put in state to be able to check. So Torque and connected to my car, or Torque and between the hours of 8 and 5. That way it'll only run when you want it to run. So since we already have parse clean file, let's click that. So we want it to not just run one time when Torque is open. We also want it to run every couple minutes. So to do that, we need to long press on the Torque app here and click Add. And then we're going to select a time element, and we're going to click every down here at the bottom. So it warns you not to do it more than every 2 minutes. So you can set this to whatever interval you want, every 2 minutes, every 5 minutes, whatever it happens to be. That way you can have it repeat every 2 minutes while Torque is active. When Torque gets closed, then you can go ahead, then it'll stop reading the file, because obviously it'll be the same after that's done. Make sure you disable from and until. That way it just runs every 2 minutes. Hit back, and now every 2 minutes when Torque is running, it's going to invoke that parse file task. So there you go, hit the checkbox, and now you're ready to go. Every time you start your car up and you have Torque live, so if you open it up manually, or if you wanted to create a task to open it automatically, when Torque runs, it will then invoke this every 2 minutes, which will parse that data, and upload it to Home Assistant. That's how I get my car data from my car directly into Home Assistant. So thank you again for watching to this far in the video. I know this was a long one. If you did like this project, please make sure you give the video a thumbs up and make sure you make a comment below if you've gone ahead and attempted this project. Let me know if it worked for you. Let me know if I missed a step somewhere. If I did happen to miss any steps, I'll be happy to update the blog post with those missing steps, but I hopefully captured everything here in a comprehensive method. If you want to see more of my Home Assistant projects, click on the playlist right above here. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel by clicking our logo right here. Thank you again. I'll see you in the upcoming video.